We're late.
Let me figure out here. You're Ian.
Yes.
I'm looking at your hair. And Kurt, how do you do? So, have you guys had lunch yet? I brought a sandwich, and so I was going to maybe either grab that, or I didn't know if you wanted to go out and get something. And so we should come in. Sit down. I've got 2 chairs.
When my best friend Curtis and I graduated from college, we thought we were done with professors, and we're supposed to feel like we had our whole lives ahead of us.
But we'd just heard some rather disconcerting news. Someday, we were going to die. And maybe sooner than we thought. For the first time in American history, our generation was at risk of having a shorter lifespan than our parents. And it was because of what we ate.
So we started to keep track of what we were eating. But we found we needed help making sense of our data.
So hair is a continuous recorder. It's a tape recorder of diet. And so this hamburger that becomes part of my diet will eventually find its way into my hair.
Oh, there it is. There it is. See that big red one?
All right. Well, I've analyzed your hair, and the real conclusion is that the carbon in your bodies really originates from corn.
From corn.
When I'm talking about corn, I'm not talking about corn on the cob, sweet corn. I'm talking about the corn that's being used as a material that's going into the foods that we use ubiquitously. The apple juices and the grape juices that are canned and they say sweet, that's going to be a high fructose corn syrup. And then you look down the meats, beefs, porks, chickens. You feed them corn, and that gets turned into their biomass that we consume. And you walk down the cookie aisle.
Cornstarch, corn gluten meal, hydrolyzed corn protein,
Corn syrup, corn starch, corn syrup solids,
cornstarch,
hydrolyzed corn protein, high fructose corn syrup,
corn king bacon.
For Americans that I've run, the isotope analysis on, those numbers are showing this huge weight of the influence of corn.
Mr. Charles Pyatt, 2637 Floyd Line Street, Green, Iowa, 50636. Dear Mr. Pyatt, I hope December finds you well. We got your name from a corn growers association. They suggested you were the kind of guy who might be willing to help us out with a rather unusual idea. We recently learned that people who grew up eating the way we did are basically made out of corn. Oh, what the heck? We're writing with a strange proposal. We want to move to Iowa and plant a single acre of corn on your land. We don't know a thing about corn. Seems like a good time to find out. Sincerely, I am Cheney and Curt Ellis.
I'm moving from Boston to Iowa. Yeah, I'm gonna grow an acre of corn and see what happens with it. What's up with you? How's your high-paying job?
Ian and I had grown up on the coast, but for some reason, we felt drawn to the Midwest.
Can I have the biscuits with gravy?
Maybe it was because a long time before there was corn in our hair, there was corn in our genes. By incredible coincidence, Ian and I each had a great-grandfather from the same tiny county in rural Iowa.
Three generations after our great-grandparents left, we were moving back to find out how an acre of corn could get from a field in Iowa into our hair.
Well, my dad bought this farm back in the Depression, back in 36, I think. My grandparents lived on the next one down east over here, and they moved in there in 1900.
Is it always this cold?
Well, sometimes it gets chillier. This is cold. That's what it looks like.
Where do you think our acre ought to be?
Right out in here, and
Oh, how big's an acre?
an acre, by half, I guess probably about 8 rows here,
Okay.
something like that. Would make all the way through, as far as you can see, 8 rows would make an acre.
So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Green, Iowa. Population 1,015. It seemed like we'd been in town 10 minutes, and people already knew what we were up to.
I mean, I've heard people talking about it. You guys were gonna plant some corn and kind of watch it grow, I guess.
Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. You know, I remember when he was that big.
You do?
I'm a very old man.
I think he was living in Boston then.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Green looked like a lot of Midwestern farm towns. But for us, this place was different. 100 years ago, it was the home of Melvin W. Ellis and Claire Eugene Cheney, people we knew almost nothing about. Dear friend, was very glad to hear from you. Everything is the same as usual at the store. That 6 o'clock dinner was something great, all right. 1,000 miles away from where we'd grown up, it was hard to imagine that Iowa had once been home.
There's some Ellis's over here in the C section, and then there's Cheney's over in that section over there on the other side of the road.
It's the strangest of coincidences that Ian and I became friends, and our families come from this tiny, tiny town in the middle of the country together.
People have moved away and have forgotten about the basic tenets of their existence, you know. If they really come back and smell the roses, it's all right here. Farmers' cooperative elevator is a very significant part of our economy
Why is it called an elevator?
because you had to have some form of an elevator shaft or whatever to get the corn back up in so they could store it. Remember, I'm not a farmer, I'm a funeral director. We do plant things sometimes, but
And what is this here?
that's excess corn. That's our overage of corn this year. The elevator's full.
So does this just get thrown out, or?
No, that'll all be shipped out this spring.
But that's what couldn't fit in that huge thing.
That's right.
Does that happen every year?
Well, it has the last few years.
If you were given the power to design an ideal place to grow the corn crop with all of its requirements and all of its characteristics, you would design something that looked very much like Iowa.
Ricardo Salvador is an agronomist at Iowa State University. He agreed to show us the plant we would be growing.
So what you're looking at here is a grass plant. So it's a very close relative in exactly the same family as the stuff that you have growing in your lawn. This is obviously a gigantic version of those grasses.
Our 1 acre lawn would be growing a giant grass whose ancestors looked very different. Native corn originated in southern Mexico, but found a happy home in Iowa, a land of fertile soils and humid summers. Gradually, one type of corn replaced all the others, a versatile crop named yellow dent, which over time came to dominate the entire middle of the country.
We are at the world's only corn palace. We welcome you here and hope you enjoy the time while you're here. There we go. What you see right here is a picture of the very first corn palace. It was opened in 1892 as a way to show people how we grow things and to get people to come and live here.
We had a pretty good idea of what living on a farm would look like. Driving tractors, digging in the dirt, growing food.
You can't live without corn. I mean, it's an everyday part of your life, and you don't even realize it.
The Corn Palace was a kind of monument to America's favorite crop and to its love of family farms. Maybe even 1 acre farms like ours.
You got to follow your dream and give it your best shot, really. Everything starts out as a dream.
Hey.
It was going to be a long time before we could do anything we'd thought of as farming. But on the modern farm, you don't have to wait for the snow to melt before you can get to work.
Got nothing.
This looks like a place.
The first thing you should really understand is what the farm program is. And it's a very complicated program we have now.
Okay, so you got corn, you got 1 acre, here's your base.
Well, here we've got a chart that shows that the direct payment on corn is going to be 28 cents
Payment from
from the U.S. government. Whether you like it or not, it's part of growing corn.
Did or will you plant or produce an agricultural commodity on land for which a highly erodible determination has not been made?
$29. So you're gonna get 14 now and you'll get 14 in October.
I don't know of a single farm out here that isn't in the government program. I'll guarantee you, if you go out and just raise an acre of corn without any government payments, you're gonna lose money.
Really?
Definitely.
Just for moving to Green and telling the government we were going to plant an acre of corn, we were going to get $28. And the more corn you grow, the more money you get. We should have grown 1,000 acres.
I just found this the other day, and now I got somebody to show it to.
It didn't take long to find relatives in Greene. Dawn Cheney, the widow of my third cousin, Paul Cheney, lived on the same farm where my great-grandfather grew up.
There's his plane. Uncle Claire's plane.
Claire Cheney, my great-grandfather, had what looked like a typical childhood on the farm.
There's the silo and there's the hog house.
On the old Cheney farm, they grew almost all the food they ate, and it looked a lot like the kind of farm we'd grown up imagining. Ray Cheney.
Do you think I look like these folks?
I'm sure you do. You're a Cheney. You're a Cheney. Now there's the barn.
The Cheney farm was supported through the years by farm subsidies, an earlier version of the program we'd signed up for. In those days, the government supported family farms by stabilizing the amount of corn produced each year. This sometimes meant taking land out of production. With supply and demand in balance, crop prices stayed high. For years, the program kept farms like the Cheneys afloat by limiting the amount of grain that got to market. But in 1973, a new Secretary of Agriculture, Earl L. Butz, reoriented the farm program.
What we want out of agriculture is plenty of food, and that's our drive now. We have experienced a 180-degree turn in the philosophy of our farm programs. We've abandoned the long-time philosophy of curtailment and cut back to the new philosophy of expansion. And it makes sense.
On the Cheney land, the old tomato gardens and pastures are now planted almost entirely in corn as part of a neighbor's grain operation. Even our acre is actually part of a much larger farm, run by another neighbor named Rich Johnson.
Well, I grew up a half a mile just south of this corner here. And we farm that up there. And then this is George Uhlenhop. We farm his land right here. And then this is my mom's farm. We farm that. And that's our other grain farm right up there with the big bins on it. So that's another farm of ours. Farmers are, the ones that are in it are getting bigger. You either have to be in it and a pretty good size, or you kind of get squeezed out.
How many bushels do you expect to get off an acre?
1,000.
I think you're dreaming.
One thing I've noticed over the years is the little farmers getting out of it and the big farmers getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The government pays the farmers, and it's just a big grain operation, and I think they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
January soybeans at 5.45, down 1 3/4, and May soybeans at 5.48, down 1 1/4 cents.
There's 3 fungicides and an insecticide. What do corn growers really want? More corn. Way, way more corn. Go where no one's gone before. More corn. That's more like it. Comprised of 4 separate registered products.
Curt Ellis.
Hey, Ian Cheney.
Hi, Ian. Al Marth.
How you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
What can I help you with today?
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer. Okay. What kind of ground are you guys working on? Is it a sandier type soil?
I haven't done any analysis of it, but it's a basic brown Iowa.
Essentially, the crop needs nutrients to in order to produce the maximum yield, and you want to have the biggest potential out there to get the biggest yield you can. Past couple of years, we've had probably 200 bushel corn around here, and we like that a lot. So, there you go.
Thanks.
Looks like a farmer now.
Stand right in this area, you'll probably get a good smell of the ammonia.
Oh yeah, I get it. Any advice for driving with this thing?
Yeah, don't hit anything. That's a bad thing.
Okay, we know that there's 43,560 square feet in an acre. And we're going to try to mark out 1 acre for corn.
So I push this forward?
Yeah, push it forward.
Terrified. All right, we're up. All right. Hey, Rickett, are you kidding? Seriously.
Well, you want to go another round?
Yeah, but slower maybe.
No, we got to go this speed. Here's the brake.
Oh, where's the brake? Ow. All right, I'm very bad at driving a tractor.
Well, let's go.
All right.
Thanks largely to our 150-pound injection of anhydrous ammonia, we could grow 4 times as much corn as our great-grandparents could have gotten from the same piece of land.
You gotta follow this little line.
Stop!
On almost every farm, there was a tank of ammonia fertilizer. And it seemed to be working. Elevators were full in almost every town we saw. In fact, they were a lot more than full.
Holy shit!
That was fun.
So Mina Walliser would have been your aunt, and Melvin Wilbur Ellis was my great-grandfather. The closest relative I could find was a third cousin, twice removed, who explained that my great-grandfather was in the farm machinery business.
That's an Oliver 70 tractor.
Great-grandfather Melvin would have made that.
His factory in Charles City manufactured those.
Just north of Greene, Melvin W. Ellis ran the Hart Parr Tractor Works, where they built Old Reliable, the first machine ever to be called a tractor.
That's so cool. It's awesome. It's beautiful.
About 1939, just before World War II started. We got an M farm hull and a 10-foot power binder. Well, that changed a lot. As the tractor progressed, you didn't have to fight with horses all the time, hitching them up, harnessing, feeding, carrying them down. A lot of work, a lot of work. Yeah, a lot of work.
As tractors took over work on the farm, a single farmer could work more and more land. Farm kids, like Ian's great-grandfather, didn't have to work in the fields anymore and began leaving the farm to do other things. Claire Cheney bought one of the first planes in the county, got a job making aerial maps of farmland, and saw from above as corn farms got bigger and bigger. Today, it's not uncommon for a single farmer in Greene to work 1,000 acres. And what smaller farms remain are getting consolidated into still larger operations.
There's, an awful lot of farmsteads that are just plain disappearing. You go down the road here, and while there used to be the Crow place, there used to be the Marzens. There's just so many of the homesteads that are gone.
Corn again. Get all the housing out of Floyd County, it makes them easier for them to farm it. Because then you don't have all these little houses and stuff in the way. You can just farm through everything, and you can get a lot of acreage done if you're not turning around all the time.
It's the 4th of May today, and the ground is fairly good and warm. We come in here with a planter. We planted Liberty Link corn at a population of about 31,000.
31,000.
Kernels to the acre.
Watch out, birds.
That'll take care about your acre right there.
Planting 31,000 seeds was not exactly a hands-on experience. But then again, it only took us 18 minutes.
You boys get your corn planted?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
We did. We planted 1 acre of corn.
All right.
Or we think we did. We didn't really see anything go in the ground.
Oh, yeah, that's magic.
Do you have anything with corn in it here? Here.
Does life in the bakery change during planting season?
Well, you don't see the farmers as much. And for just that brief time, it doesn't take very long anymore with the equipment they have to get it planted. Then they're back and twiddling their thumbs until it's time to spray something.
What you're growing is an industrialized corn. It has been changed over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years with one goal in mind, which is yield. The way it was done was not to make every plant produce more so much as to make the plants tolerate living close together. This plant is kind of an urban creature. It lives in these cities of corn. We're now up to close to 200 bushels of corn per acre. It's what, 10,000 pounds? 5 tons of food from 1 acre of land. It's an amazing amount of food.
Whenever I build fence, I hit a rock.
Maybe we should take one before we go.
Yeah, why don't we have you? Yeah, pretty awesome.
How you doing?
A little greasy there.
June is spraying season in Green.
Spraying for those aphids, I wanted to get that chemical down underneath the leaves a little bit, so I was using 50 pounds of pressure. I was traveling 12 miles.
This 90-foot sprayer was going to be the key to fighting the age-old nemesis of farmers everywhere: weeds. And the first weed we found on our acre was weed.
It's hemp that they used in World War II to make rope out of. But it's the same plant.
As
It just doesn't have they claim it don't have the kick to it. I don't know. It grows wild out here.
well, that's pretty great.
So
What a
you
big
guys will
guy.
be hunting ditches. I ain't gonna tell you where I found it. Let's see you.
All right. Jack brought us this marijuana.
We got a lot of different variety of weeds out there. We got some lamb's quarter, we got some cocklebur.
Our corn seeds had been genetically modified to resist an herbicide called Liberty. Liberty would kill the weeds, and our Liberty Link corn would continue to grow.
We got to be careful not to put Liberty chemical on a cornfield that isn't Liberty Link corn, or it'll just kill it. Generally, we don't spray at night, but there's a big rain scare coming for tomorrow, and I'd like to get this over with.
You think I can ride along and press the button that releases the Liberty?
When we get to your acre, we'll let you spray your acre.
That sounds good.
I used to have these dreams that I was flying, you know, flying in dreams. So, but in the fall, this corn all turns a golden color, sort of like wheat when it's ripe. So I would always be flying over golden corn, the corn that was, you know, it was beautiful. The sun would be setting, and the corn was gold. So I'm moving back.
In July, my third cousin Bruce, who had grown up a farm kid in Green, moved back to town to retire.
Our acre starts about 50 yards in. There's a little pink flag stuck in the ground.
Okay. So why are we going against the grain here? When you come out here, there'll be a lot of yellow dust, which is the pollen that travels from those guys down to the ears, which haven't developed yet. There'll be like silks. Pollen gets on the end, the sticky ends of these strands, and it goes down to the individual kernel. Each silk is attached to an individual kernel to be.
The corner of our acre! Where is it? In the corn!
Yeah, look at that.
Where is it? Oh, yeah.
Welcome to your own hometown.
We are in the lovely town of Green, Iowa, celebrating Green River Days. I'm the Queen of Green. Yep. Green has always been an agricultural community, and Iowa alone would produce enough corn to feed the entire United States.
The agriculture of our great-grandparents had come a long way. Curt's great-grandfather's tractors had evolved into 32-row planters and sprayers with a 90-foot span. And if my great-grandfather, Claire, could fly his plane over the Corn Belt today, he would see more than 2 trillion corn plants, the largest corn crop in American history. Curtis and I are going to do a taste test on our corn to see how it's coming along, to see how it's tasting.
It looks good.
It looks great.
Good. It's not very good, Ian.
Yeah.
It tastes like soda.
I think that looks like a nice corn porridge. Yeah, it's disgusting. It tastes like chalk.
I really thought it would taste better. It tastes like crap.
If you're standing in a field in Iowa, there's an immense amount of food being grown, none of it edible. The commodity corn, nobody can eat. It must be processed before we can eat it. It's a raw material. It's a feedstock for all these other processes. And the irony is that an Iowa farmer can no longer feed himself.
When we harvest our corn in the fall, its first step toward being processed into food will be a 7.5-mile ride down the road to the town elevator.
So in the fall, when you do harvest your acre of corn, it'll come into the elevator here where it will pull across a scale, weigh your truck or wagon, and then it will be pulled across to the dump pit where it'll be dumped in with a bunch of other corn. Your acre of corn is impossible to track just because of the sheer volume that we deal with.
We were still months away from harvest, but our work on the farm was basically done. It was already clear that when the time came to say goodbye to the corn from our acre, we would never know exactly where it would end up.
After the crop is delivered to the elevator, following corn into the food system becomes a game of probabilities. Of the 10,000 pounds of corn our acre is likely to produce, 32% will be either exported or turned into ethanol, in neither case ending up in our food or in our hair.
Ethanol.
But 490 pounds will become sweeteners, like high fructose corn syrup, and more than half our crop, a full 5,500 pounds, will be fed to animals to become meat. So while our corn matured in the field, we decided to look into its eventual fate and try to go where corn goes.
There's a wall of corn! We produce quite a little corn on our farm, and a lot of it goes into feeds. This is called wet corn gluten feed. This is a byproduct of the ethanol industry. It's real flaky, and the cattle just love it. This is high moisture corn. This is shelled corn directly out of the field. This is a third product that we feed to our cattle, which uses corn. This is called corn silage. This is the whole plant run through the corn chopper, and it's just another way to utilize all the corn that's grown in the state of Iowa. And there's the corn, the silage, and the hay, and the gluten, all right there.
So it's almost all corn.
Yeah, it's 60% of the ration is corn, probably.
Look at that, man.
Like a mop on his head.
They're really changing their look here. Well, what are we gonna get? Will people order now?
Welcome to McDonald's. I take your order.
Hi, yes, could I have a big and tasty sandwich and a small fries, please?
Look at that.
So would you consider yourself corn-fed?
In a matter, yeah, probably.
What are you eating for lunch here today?
Corn-fed beef. Do you actually know anything about corn-fed beef? Do you know what it does to them?
What is it?
To the cattle. It's a good thing they slaughter when they do, because it actually kills them to feed them to make the meat like that. So they'd be dead in 6 months anyway eating that stuff, so it's just as well that they slaughter them.
Really?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Where is this?
Every major confinement feedlot, everywhere.
We'd moved to Iowa to grow corn. But to see where corn goes, we would have to leave the Corn Belt.
I'm Curt Ellis. Curt, nice to meet you. I'm Bob Bledsoe.
Ian Cheney.
Ian, nice to meet you. Yes, it's cool to look out there at all those cattle and feel warm and fuzzy that I'm feeding a lot of American people. Our operation is that we buy calves and we bring them into the feedlot and feed them for 140, 150 days here, and then sell them to the packing plant as fed cattle. Basically, 14 to 16,000 head are finished here. We don't like being big, but right now, you're looking at a family farm in Yuma County, Colorado.
We were still getting used to the new look of the family farm. But the farms in Colorado did have one major thing in common with the farms we'd seen in Iowa.
We're a cattle company, but we do grow a lot of corn. About 7,000 acres every year. And it is all used for animal feed.
The grasslands of eastern Colorado, where cattle traditionally grazed, have become some of the biggest corn farms in the country. And corn has replaced grass as the principal feed for cattle.
The mass production of corn drives the mass production of animal protein in confined operations. And you gotta have cheap feed to do the confinements. That's my brand. I just sold these to the feedlot in March. You know, I really don't have many other alternatives.
At Sue Jarrett's cow-calf operation, we saw how cattle are raised before they go to the feedlot, eating grass on the open range. When Sue's father ran the ranch, cattle spent almost all their lives eating grass, and it took several years to reach market weight. But in recent years, cattle have begun spending more and more of their lives in feedlots.
They put on weight faster if you don't let them move. So total confinement, less space for movement. They eat continually, and you get them into the market, into the food chain. But cattle were not meant to be on a corn-fed diet for that long. You know, we used to feed them 60, 90 days was one thing. Up to 120, you could make it. You start really pushing cattle on a corn-based diet after that, the ulcers and the stomachs don't take it well, and they start getting sick.
So this is just a hole in the stomach here?
Scientists researching the effects of feeding corn to cattle have developed a method of looking into their actual stomachs during digestion.
It's very warm and it's pretty packed in there.
100 years ago, most cattle probably were fed grass, hay, and they were out grazing. We've gone from really feeding no grain to rations now that contain up to 90% grain. But these animals evolved not in feeding these high starch or things like corn. And you feed a lot of corn, more acid's produced, and the animal can get into trouble. Corn in this environment produces these acids, the pH drops, and then they succumb to a condition we call acidosis. And if it's not treated, the animal dies.
The corn fed to cattle is supplemented with low doses of antibiotics that help them combat acidosis. Livestock now consumes 70% of the antibiotics in the United States. But antibiotics also help cattle survive the conditions of confinement. This facility, with more than 100,000 head of cattle, produces as much waste as a city of 1.7 million people.
A lot of people look at these large feedlots now and question whether that's what we should be doing. But the reason that it's done, it's economic. And because of the yields on corn and the amount produced and the efficiency of producing corn, it's lower cost per unit of usable energy to the animal.
During the last 30 years, corn harvests have increased dramatically. And the price of corn in real dollars has dropped. Largely thanks to a ready supply of cheap corn, eastern Colorado is now home to some of the biggest feedlots in the world.
The meat that we eat in this day and age is produced in a feedlot. It's grain-fed meat, and we produce a characteristically obese animal, an animal whose muscle tissue looks more like fat tissue than it does lean meat in wild animals. And if you look at a T-bone steak from a grain-fed cow, it may have as much as 9 grams of saturated fat, whereas a comparable steak from a grass-fed animal would have 1.3 grams of saturated fat. And so this is the meat that we eat in America. America's favorite meat is ground beef, hamburger meat.
Could I have the bacon cheeseburger?
Okay.
And hamburger meat is really not meat, but it's rather fat disguised as meat. It contains 65% of its calories by energy as fat.
Oh my God, that's great.
It was starting to make a lot of sense why Curt and I had found corn in our hair. America's favorite meat happened to be our favorite too. Burgers made from corn-fed beef are cheap and easy to find. In fact, if you were born in the last 30 years in America, chances are you've only ever tasted corn-fed beef.
If the American people wanted strictly grass-fed beef, we would produce grass-fed beef for them. But it's definitely more expensive. And one of the tenets in America is America wants and demands cheap food.
One of the reasons I moved back to Iowa is because I liked and I remembered what it was like when I was a kid. And this is so homey to have this little wooden building, and that tiny little wooden building was enough to store all the crops of the people around here.
Green's old grain elevator, which was built in our great-grandfather's time, had become obsolete and was being burned down.
It used to all fit in that small wooden building, and now, you know, it doesn't even fit into the huge concrete structure that we have over there. The amount of acreage has gone up, and the productivity per acre has gone up. So the amount of production is just incredible.
The corn from our acre would all go to Green's concrete elevator, which was built in the 1970s, a time of dramatic increases in corn harvest.
After decades of subsidy programs and all these incredible regulations on what farmers could grow and how much and where, the government was saying, it's all over. Grow your operation. You've got to plant more land, plant fence row to fence row, boys, and buy out your neighbor if he's not willing to grow. And when we had so much surplus corn and there was such an interest in trying to derive the maximum benefit out of it, investment was made to develop this corn sweetener industry.
I was wondering if it might be possible to visit a corn syrup factory sometime.
Visit in what sense?
Heard starting back sooner, been in and out of the office.
On camera, off camera?
On camera.
We don't allow cameras into the plants.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
The real reason for this, the security of these plants and food processing facilities is as much about the security of the food that's being created as it is your personal safety.
I was wondering whether it's possible to make high fructose corn syrup in my home.
Well, what, 15.5% dry moisture, how efficient your separations are. Make it acidic, separate it in the wet milling process. 1% divided by 50, leave it there for a while, counterflow water wash on it. Once you pour off all that crap that you're going to have to do in the bottom, you're going to have to add water in, yep.
Okay, thanks so much. Take care. Bye. Oh my goodness, that was a marathon. All right, so step one apparently is soaking this corn in water that has been heated to 140 degrees. And we're also supposed to have put in sulfuric acid at 200 parts per million, which is a tiny parts per gallon.
0.0007.
So 7 it's not even close to a teaspoon. It's like you're gonna stick your finger in and whatever drop sticks to it.
No, man. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do that.
It's so much easier.
What we're looking for is yellow dent number 2. So it's already a certain type of corn that will yield a lot of starch.
Well, this is going to soak for 16 hours to get it soft and begin to separate the starch from the fiber. All right, day 2.
It smells sweet.
What does something sweet smell like? Sugar?
Yes.
There's a lot of technology, quote unquote, that goes into making corn sweetener.
All right, step 2. Physically damage the corn.
It doesn't look like a kernel anymore at the end of the process, but that is part of that innovative system.
The endoamylase and spezyme prime enzyme randomly hydrolases alpha-1,4 glucosidic bonds to reduce the viscosity of a gelatinized starch.
Everything really is a science when you boil it down.
Wow. That's pretty sweet.
It's sweet.
It tastes good.